Hi, I'm Alfonso Muchacho, and today I'm going to show you how to make this bass line. So Audiotent sent me their new preset pack for Diva called Scope, and scrolling through the presets for a bit of inspiration, I found this bass stab called Virus. The thing that struck me was how well it worked as a stabby bass sound, but also how thick and melodic it was. This is down to the way that the oscillators have been detuned, and each stack has been tuned to a different note to create this chord sound that you're hearing. So what I wanted to do was go through how the sound was constructed to better understand what I like about it. This is a really valuable technique that can help advance your understanding of sound design. By reverse engineering presets, you can learn not only how to make that sound, but how each modification to the initial sound contributes to the final finished sound that you like. So let's dive right in and see how this was made. We're going to start off with the initial Jupiter 8 template. This gives us a simple 2 oscillator setup that you see here. Now, as I mentioned before, this thick bass line is down to detuning, so we're not even going to need to use both oscillators. We just need to use one saw wave, and we'll tune that down 1 octave. So the next thing we're going to want to do is remove the high pass filter here and set it to feedback. This will let us give the sound a little bit more bite. We're only going to set this to about 11 here, nothing too dramatic. One quick tip is when you're setting values in Diva, it's helpful to use the scroll wheel on your mouse, as it lets you go up in increments of 1, as I did here. Sadly, when you're detuning the oscillators, as you'll see shortly, this doesn't work as well and it becomes very fiddly. But for most parameters, the scroll wheel is the way to go. If you're on a Mac or using a laptop, I have no idea if there's an alternative without using an external mouse. So next up is the filter. Now, usually when I'm playing about and designing a sound, I tend to leave the filter fully open so I can hear what's going on across all the frequencies. But with stabbing sounds such as this, I know we're going to need to modify the filter cutoff to create that sound. So let's go ahead and dial that down to about 61. We'll turn the mode to rough to give us a bit more grit, and now we'll set the envelope mod to around 95. This is going to allow us to get quite a dramatic sound once we set up the filter envelope. So moving on to the first envelope, we're looking for a short stab, so we'll need a fast attack. The decay can be set at about halfway. The sustain will need to be set to full, and we'll have a relatively short release just to stop any pops or clicks as the sound ends. As I said, the important part to get right is the filter envelope, and we don't need to change it too much from its default settings, just need to shorten the decay time a bit. Listen to the sound as we reduce it. I'm also going to adjust the velocity slider, so depending on how hard we press, the key changes the amount that the envelope affects the filter. Nice and stabby. Okay, so before we go on to effects, there's a few settings on this page we need to adjust first. Down at the bottom here, we'll need to go ahead and change the mode to mono with 6 voices and set the stack to 4. This is important as we'll be tuning the 4 stacks individually to create the rich chord-like sound. So let's go ahead into the trimmers tab, and this is where we can start tuning the individual oscillators. Over here on the right, you'll see the stack detune. By tuning each oscillator stack individually, you're essentially playing a chord with one note. So let's tune these to 12, 7 and 19. And if you imagine all these on a keyboard, you can visualize how big this chord really is. You've got one oscillator playing like a full octave above, one playing a 7th, and the last one playing a 7th above the second stack. So now you can hear that sound coming through. Now all we need to do is add some subtle effects and we're done. Another one of the presets from Audiotent that caught my ear was this pluck sound called Resident. And when I heard it, I immediately thought that it would work really well in a kind of arpeggiated melody. I'll play the sound now and then play you the melody that I created. As you can hear, it's got this wonderfully rich and complex tone, complemented by quite a bit of noise added to it. Let's dive back into Diva and take a look at how it's made. So you're going to need to start off with the Juno 60 patch as a start point. Here you want to turn down the pulse width modulation to the minimum setting and make sure the sub is turned up to halfway. And then the noise has got to be set to around 59. Nothing else in the oscillator section needs changing. We'll use a sawtooth and a bit of the sub oscillator to give us a real beefy sound. Over in the next section, we're going to use a high pass module and dial that in to about 75. This should keep some of the real low frequencies out of the way. We're not going to need them for a melodic pluck such as this. Next up is the filter section. This needs to be changed to the VCF byte module here, as this is where it starts to get interesting. Here we want to set the cutoff to around 94 or 95 and use the resonance and crank it up to about 30. This will help emphasize the pluckiness of the sound. We'll need the envelope to affect the filter positively, so that should be dialed into around 66. And finally, we'll change the LFO2 knob down here to mod wheel. This will allow us to close the filter with the mod wheel on our keyboard if we want less high end to come through. So you can hear the bass of the sound that we want, but we still need to dial in that pluck using the envelope. So let's bring the delay and the sustain right down. Next up is the filter envelope. This doesn't need much in the way of drastic changes from the default setting because a lot of the modulation that we need is going to come from LFO down in the bottom here. So this LFO is set to modulate the filter quite dramatically. Let's set the sync to 2/1 and then crank up both the rate mod and the depth mod to maximum for the most dramatic modulation possible. Finally, let's set the frequency mod source to envelope 1. Now let's listen to how this affects our sound. There we go, we're getting plucky. So next up, let's get this arpeggio set up. Nothing too fancy here, just set the clock to 16ths and then make sure it's set to 2 octaves. Now we're going to be in business. So that's sounding good. All we need to do is dial in some effects. This is obviously a personal choice. Here I'll go for the rotary effect and delay. So that's sounding good. So it's worth noting that I've added some automation along here, modulating the mod wheel setting. This is what's affecting the filter. So I hope you find this useful. I think it's really helpful in trying to reverse engineer presets. It'll give you a deeper understanding of the sounds that you like and how they're made.